What is happening in the atmosphere when a plane encounters turbulence?
Yeah, well, what happens is you always have rising air currents that are coming up, and that typically happens in thunderstorms because you get rising air, and that's why you have those towering cumulus clouds in thunderstorms. But a lot of times you have turbulence that's called clear air turbulence. That's the really kind of scary stuff that's really hard to predict, not only for a weather person or meteorologist, but also as a pilot to try to figure out where that clear air turbulence is. And they try to help you on the ground with the computer models and saying, hey, there might be clear air turbulence here, there may be clear air turbulence here. So try to look out for that. And those airplanes are really sophisticated now where they can actually kind of seek it out and try to avoid it.
What's the weather situation that's causing that? Is it a difference in temperatures?
Yeah, usually it's a difference in temperatures, and you get rising air. They're called thermals, especially in the summertime. Especially a lot of private pilots that are flying around in the summertime. It's always really bumpy because you have the ground that's getting heated up, and you get that rising air, and you typically see that. Yeah. Also, you get a shift in the winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and that can also create some of that turbulence as well. Usually, you can see the turbulence when you have those high, thin, wispy clouds. That's an indication that that wind is really strong at the higher altitudes. And and you've also got the lenticular clouds, those big UFO-looking clouds that come over mountain tops, and that's when there's some serious wind up there, and that's basically what can cause some of that turbulence.
All right, so what happened last weekend with this flight out of Hawaii?
From what I read on the Honolulu flight, they were actually at 36,000 feet, and they actually encountered turbulence inside of a thunderstorm. We try to fly around thunderstorms. We try to divert around thunderstorms, but sometimes there's nothing you can do. And even the people who were on the flight were saying, look, we just got back to our seat. I couldn't even put my seatbelt on, and then I hit the turbulence. That's why it's so important. My wife's a flight attendant too, and I always make sure that whenever I'm on a plane, I'm buckled in because you just don't know when that turbulence is going to hit, especially that clear air turbulence. And that's something that is really, can be really dangerous at times. And pilots and people at the airport and airlines try to do everything they can, and the weather people as well, to try to steer planes away from that because we don't want what happened up there and what happens anytime to mess up anybody's flight or anybody's plans.
Yeah, it's really alarming when you're on a flight and there's major turbulence. Is it ever dangerous? Can it ever bring down an airplane?
I don't know that I've never heard of any type of situation with that because usually you encounter turbulence at a pretty high altitude. So for it to actually knock a plane out of the air, that's not something that I've ever heard of. Obviously, if you're very low to the ground, then you could get some uplift, and we call it wind shear, and that's a type of a turbulence. So I guess that technically could be potentially dangerous for an airplane that's trying to come in to land. And if you get wind shear, that's kind of a form of turbulence, if you will, and that actually can knock a plane off its path and cause it to crash or possibly go off course. But usually, when you're in the upper levels of the atmosphere, you get those big bumps, and the plane can recover. But it's just a matter of how where are you when that happens, and it can be a very jarring experience for not only for the passengers but for the crew, because the crew's standing up and they're serving you and doing things like that. And then of course even the pilots too. There are a lot of times, I mean, they're strapped in, but they could be up going to the bathroom or something like that, and they can hit their head just as well as anybody else can.
Yeah, as a pilot, is it terrifying to you? Do you have to really work on not panicking when you're in that situation?
Absolutely. That's what they teach all of us, and that's what I teach my students as a flight instructor, is to not panic. You're going to get bumps in the plane, even if you're in a Cessna 172 or a Boeing 737. You're going to get bumps, but the plane is inherently stable, and so you just know you have to ride through those bumps, and you have to plan for situations where things are not going to go right. So that's why the training is so important, to have all of those kind of worst case scenario situations played out and practiced when you're safe. So that way, when you do encounter them, it's like night and day. You just turn on your switch and you just go about your business, and you try to stay as calm as possible. But human nature, we're all going to get probably a little bumpy and jumpy as we get bumped around in the air.